Recording. Agreed.
So I heard the pandemic is over.
That's what a lot of people are saying. And if defined by like governing bodies ruling a pandemic emergency, then that makes sense. I don't know why that would be anybody's standard, but I actually just saw today. I think did I send it to you, or maybe I just might have saved it for myself. I'm gonna look it up so I get the cases correct. Someone just wrote 8 hours ago on Twitter. People call it X now, but just like they changed the name of the Sears Tower in Chicago, I
Yeah.
will still be referring to it as the Sears Tower. Um, However, 20 years later. So it said they're quoting Liz, what's her face? I love Twitter handles, man. Her Twitter handle is Real Gay Arby's. Fauci said in 2021 that COVID cases in the US would need to fall well below 10,000 per day before we could achieve a degree of normality. We are at 1.3 million cases per day right now. Technically, that's not entirely accurate. We were the week of February 5th, which might actually be the last time that we had a fuller compilation of data. 1.3 million infections per day. 2.8% actively infectious. So I don't know. I don't. I still am confused. I think we always knew it was going to be endemic. We always knew it was going to sort of. So at some point, we just. I assume people are just like we just have to call it. I also think that politics is involved there, where they were like, before we run for election again, we gotta have to. The pandemic's got to be over. So I think one of the reasons the pandemic emergency was declared ended during Biden's tenure as president was so then he could claim with some degree of indicative evidence that he ended the pandemic. Because he did. I mean, he literally ended it for a lot of people just by saying we're not in a pandemic emergency anymore. And then that way he could say Trump started the pandemic because he's the one who declared the pandemic emergency.
Right. We've talked about this quite a bit, but I think that actually fits with your definition of pandemic because it wasn't actually really connected to the virus. It was connected to the reaction and the emotions
A lot of it.
and,
Yeah. Yeah.
and sort of collective sentiment about the virus. So in a
Yeah.
weird way, like that is true.
Yeah. If the pandemic is no longer an actual, like as if basically through this pandemic, we redefined pandemic, which a lot of people are attempting to do. I refuse to allow it because, again, I'm a semantic conservative. Also, it distorts our sense of reality if we start saying things that aren't true over and over again. Because a pandemic is just a virus across multiple geographic areas, multiple countries, or at least spreading significantly across even a single country in terms of multiple. But it has to like spread around more than just like a city. It has to move around. So we had that, right? A virus was spread around the flipping world, right? So, and it's still around the world. Now, maybe you could just say, well, once the spread stops and it's kind of hit everywhere it's going to hit, that could be the end, in which case it shifts into endemic. But for years, we were manipulated on that basis, saying like the pandemic is just not going to end unless you A, B, and C, unless you do this thing, you do this thing, you do that thing. None of which were accurate because we're talking about a respiratory virus, which no one's ever been able to defeat. We influenza, anybody? That's kind of not going anywhere. Yeah, we've had vaccines for that for 40 years, 50 years. Still going strong, y'all. But at some point we knew it was going to shift into endemic, meaning it was just sort of be a seasonal rise and fall. But that happened back in like 2020 and 2021. So I mean, at some point I feel like it was just like pick a point and we're going to just pretend we're not in a pandemic anymore. But the weird thing is most people's metrics, I don't think ever was, oh, we're in a pandemic because the government said so. We're in a pandemic because most people would, I would assume, maybe I'm wrong, would like go, oh, because of look how many cases, look how many hospitalizations, like look how serious this is, look how scary this is, blah blah blah, et cetera, et cetera. Because that's what was happening, like to push vaccination and mask mandates and all these things was like a case-based thing. So I think for me, once they ended the pandemic, I was like, oh, good. Everyone's going to realize this was a total sham because they just ended it with no metrics of like, oh, well, we finally hit this number, which we said once we hit that, then it'd be done. Not there was nothing. There was no justification for it. They were just like, it's over now. And everyone was like, oh, good. And I, of course, as a person who pays attention to things and maybe shouldn't, was like, what is going on? So I don't know, man. That's what I think. But again, I think it's largely political, which should lead us to today's topic because I've already rambled too much. This is one of those kind of cold opens.
Especially because
Yeah,
it may be that it's a pandemic of fear.
it
Fear,
is.
fear is
Yep.
the virus.
Fear is the virus. Although in some ways, then fear could almost be always endemic, meaning all it takes is some sort of inciting incident of any note, like a worldwide pandemic would be one I would think you should at least have some degree of fear. I think for me it was about 2 weeks of fear because I was immune compromised, and so I was like, oh no, this could be especially dangerous to me. 2 weeks or so is like appropriate. Um, I think even that was like long because I was as a person who was like under greater threat than others. Um, for most people, it should have lasted, I think, 3 to 5 days of fear. But then you look at something like January 6th, which I think should have caused about, I don't know, the average person about 24 minutes of fear. That's lasted for years and years and years. So who knows? Maybe my sense of seasonality uh, in fear is way off epidemiologically. But
The
again, all
evidence
this
would
may
seem to
run
bear that
through
out.
delusions. Yeah. Some of it's just delusional. Some of it's just sheer delusions, which one could say a lot of fears are based in.
Uh, yes, I might say perspective,
Yeah, yeah. I would say
which
delusion
which
when,
could be delusional.
yeah, a delusional perspective. Yeah, or an accurate perspective. We all have perspectives. But it's just like buttholes, right? Everyone has one. They all stink. I think, let's be fair, it's just like buttholes. Everyone has one, and some people's stink. Other people can, you can take care of your butt. You can like, I got two like Japanese style like bidet toilets now, just to manage that area. So then my opinion automatically, metaphorically, doesn't stink. All this to say, today's topic is actually about TDS, folks, which we've glancingly touched on, but we'll weave in why we even started talking about the pandemic after we introduce ourselves. My name is Brendan McNamara.
And I am Andy Swindler, TDS, otherwise known as Trump derangement syndrome.
That's right. So hopefully you've heard of that. If not, then I guess I could do a quick primer on what that means, or if it'll just sort of reveal itself. The question is TDS, Trump derangement syndrome, real? Like, and what I mean real is, does it have a foundation? But even more so, uh, is it a phenomenon that exists and is legitimate? In terms of like being online conversation, it's a term I've seen since about 2017, 2018, something like that, as a way to describe people who seemed in terms of perspective, which may or may not stink, that people's response to Trump was outsized based on who he was and what he was doing. And it specifically was a term for like years and years and years leveled at people who didn't like Trump, but it seemed like they had a bigger reaction than was due, like what was actually happening. And it got to the point where they just couldn't think clearly about anything related to Trump whatsoever. I would like to expand it in our conversations today to at least somewhat encompass people who have Trump derangement syndrome. I think it's a much smaller section. It's really not the fully traditional use of the term, but I'd like to apply it that way. For people who are like, no matter what Trump does or what happens to Trump, people are still like, this man is the man that will lead us to the promised land, which I think is really its own form of derangement. I simply think that latter form is so much less popular in terms of for people who are, getting going, zooming around the world, absorbing media influence, that sort of thing. People just don't talk about how amazing Trump is, except on like a channel, 1.5 channels, of what normal people encounter. Um, I should say average. Yeah, normal. Normal just means average. Like you're statistically average.
I think normal is getting itself onto the woke 90 list, but yeah, I know what you mean.
Yeah. So we were talking about this ahead of time. Do you have what's your thought on this? Like, is this a real sort of diagnosis, or is this a flippant way to dismiss concerns? Is TDS real? Pre-conversation, thumbs up or thumbs down?
Thumbs up, big time.
Yeah, I'm a thumbs up as well on that. I don't know if it'll be changed, but I think I'll understand it better, hopefully, at the end of this. One of the reasons we were talking about the pandemic, I thought this was an illustrative thing for people to understand TDS in action. One of the times it was invoked quite a bit, and hopefully this is something that anyone listening to kind of remembers. During the lead up to the 2020 election, uh, uh, was it 2020 election? Yeah, 2020 election. That Donald Trump had been the pandemic had come. It had been announced. The pandemic emergency had been declared. Trump started the pandemic. Thanks a lot. He uh, put into Operation Warp Speed, where a ton of money was thrown at pharmaceutical companies to speed the development of a vaccine against this novel coronavirus, SARS-CoV-2. He was saying should be ready by the end of the year. They'd be ready like beginning of 2021. We now know, of course, just for a side note, and I'm not even saying this is like a conjecture. This is a documented, evidenced thing that actually happened. They actually delayed the release, even though they were finished and the approval, all the same documents were already in for approval. They delayed the release till after the election. Some of people assume TDS might have been involved in that decision, meaning like, as many of you have already heard, like everything is on the table in terms of stopping Trump. Like we can kind of do anything. If we have to subvert democracy, if we have to abandon objective journalistic principles, or as intellectual Sam Harris said, like, I don't care if Biden has like children chained up in his basement. Like I would still vote for him and not Donald Trump. I think Sam Harris is a great example of someone who suffers from on like stage 4 TDS. So during that lead up, during the election cycle, uh, our president and our vice president, but many other people too, but specifically them, were asked if they would take the vaccine. I think on like a town hall on like CNN or whatever. And they both said, well, we're really going to have to wait and see on that. I think Kamala Harris went even farther. It was like, oh, well, both of them cast aspersions. Like, I don't know if anyone's going to take this rushed Trump vaccine. You know, I don't. It's, and some people even suggested Trump was doing this to cause more harm. He was doing this recklessly, crazily, right? Not going to take this Trump vaccine. Uh, Within months, the same vaccine came out, but they won the election. Unless you ask Trump, they won the election, became president and vice president, and within months of saying they would probably not take, or they'd really have to examine, or they'd wait a long time to ever take the vaccine. Not only did they take the vaccine, they then attempted to mandate that everyone had to take it. So all of a sudden, when Trump got out of the way, it's the same object, but you just change the branding, and it becomes not only something that you're skeptical of, perhaps even going to refuse, into something that no one is allowed to refuse. I thought was a pretty potent example that everyone in public could see of a likely manifestation of Trump derangement syndrome. Is it a syndrome that you've encountered? Was it even was TDS like a acronym you were aware of?
I don't think I was aware of the acronym until you proposed it for this episode. So that's interesting.
Yeah.
I think, as anyone listening knows, I swim in liberal, if not socialist circles more of the time. And although I really do try to keep a few tabs open on the other sides and whatnot, because it's seeped into my awareness over the years how
Mm.
much, as you just pointed out, one example of hypocrisy I think basically exists everywhere. Um,
Yes.
but 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 what really, I guess, bums me out is one thing I've noticed is how um I don't know, for lack of a better word, juvenile a lot of the insults are. Like, I mean, like so many liberals for years posting really just like ad hominem stuff, like just
Yeah, yeah.
berating Trump, making fun of this or that feature, etc. And I'd welcome anybody to dig, but I challenge you to find an example on my social media like that. I mean, I've always personally had a policy where I just don't find that constructive or useful. If there's some political reasoning to it,
Hmm.
that's great. Like, hopefully that's what we're all talking about. This is the president of the United States. They have a lot of power. They have a lot of influence. What are the outcomes of their presidency?
Yeah.
Now, clearly, this is political theater, and for decades, maybe forever, we've elected charismatic leaders, and of
Yes.
course that it accelerated
Yeah.
with the age of TV. Um, so yes, I mean my intersection with this dates back to I think I mentioned before, just being a huge fan of Obama, even having volunteered for his senatorial campaign back in 2004. Um, so for those of us in the Obama camp, Trump came as a kind of sadness, like
Mm.
gosh, this feels like a backslide. Um, I know, I know in the case of my mother, for instance, just having some really heart-wrenching conversations with her.
Mm.
Um, and I don't know if Hillary is going to be a big part of our conversation or not, but it seems like obviously relevant in the context of the 2016 election.
Mm.
Um, and just how devastated she was as a woman. And I heard that a lot in 2016, just
Oh,
women.
interesting.
So it was like, and I think you and I, one thing we do actually agree on is not, yeah, we may be slightly different on this. I'm probably a little more in favor of like, yeah, let's go ahead and get the identities and the the, the identities that haven't had these positions of power. Let's go ahead and even potentially choose the identity over the quality,
Mm.
just to break through all the ceilings, and then we can sort of feel like, okay, great, now we've broken all the ceilings. Like, so let's have a
Yeah.
real
Yeah.
playing field, a real election. Now in this case, at least back then, I thought Hillary was far more qualified, and sort of I enjoyed her disposition more. And I just think it's hilarious in America. It's like how these dynasties play out.
Yeah. Right.
It's like
Weird.
what the fuck? Like if there had been
Yeah.
another Clinton, there's two Bushes, it's like, do we
Yeah.
really have such a tiny pool of DNA to choose our presidents from?
Yes, yes. There is, right? Didn't that there was a kid, remember? There was a kid, this is years ago. Gosh, it was a girl in her teens, and she did this like genetic project and discovered that like all but two or three or something like that presidents were all genetically related to the same like uh sort of like low level royal or whatever in
Wow.
the somewhere in the UK. So yeah, no, literally, we are picking from like royal lineage almost exclusively. I can't remember who the two exceptions were, but Obama wasn't an exception. He was also like related to this person. I thought it was fast. It was so interesting. Now, again,
I
I don't know enough about genomes to like validate her data, but I just looked for a long time to see if anyone had ever been able to like prove this, like little, basically a little, one of those little geniuses, one of those poor little genius girls. But anyway,
so
I thought it was fascinating. Yeah, how we do tend towards aristocracy, aristocracy, even in a democratic republic. It's pretty funny.
yeah, oh my God.
Yeah. Oh
That's
yeah. Yeah. I don't care. I think now maybe this is me because I do have conservative elements in me, like with semantics, and I would even say I'm a little kind of I tend towards maybe a little bit of a hotep steez, which is respectability politics. I think are actually somewhat relevant. They don't dominate, but like Hillary scared me more than Trump. I didn't vote for either one of those people. Um, but I was just like, oh, I'm more convinced that Hillary has had people murdered. Um, so then I was like, I don't trust her at all. And then I don't, it's sadly in some ways because I don't trust Bill because he's not a trustworthy person. Then that reflected poorly on her, as I'm sure she was well aware in her life of phenomenal achievements. And listen, she married a man who became president. So it's not like she's, what she made some good House of Cards kind of decisions, but obviously not great, like personal moral decisions. So then I was just um, like morally, I can't say either one of them was like somehow better than the other. On paper, in terms of like if you wanted to hire someone who has done all the adjacent jobs, I mean, her resume is ludicrous.
yeah,
It's ridiculous.
right.
She's not, I don't know if she's a likable leader. Obviously, it's funny now to see some of the same people I know who probably voted for her flipping hate her now. because all she keeps talking about, she's a phenomenally and adamantly, specifically pro-Israel, to the degree of, I would almost say, almost a little anti-Palestinian. And she's doing the same thing, although I hope this is helpful for everyone. She's literally being like all these pro-Palestinian stuff. I mean, we'll have to see how much of it is Russian, bots and disinformation. Like literally, she's back to accusing anybody who disagrees with her of being a Russian spy. So I'm like, all right, so she sucks. Well, she sucks to the people who thought she didn't suck. So I'm like, this is maybe another phenomenon of Trump derangement syndrome. But if I'm a little Jackie Robinson with it, where like Jackie wasn't necessarily the best player, but he was the best player to break the glass ceiling. And Obama, I don't think was the best black man running for office, but he was, in many ways, he was like the Jackie Robinson to break the ceiling. Where you're like, I think Obama was a great, for like, as far as we should have had a black president back when we had a first black senator when they were still taking black and white photos. So there've been like black men in leadership roles for a long time, which it's amazing it took us that long to pick a black man. But he definitely was like the polish, the charisma, he's attractive. He was a great like figurehead leader. You know what I mean? Especially following like the weird ineptitude, like of like the Bush era. You know what I mean? You're like, oh, okay, well, here, this guy looks like a statesman, and he was super military industrial complexy or whatever that and in some ways, I think he failed at a lot of things he said that were important to him. Guantanamo obviously was still open, all that sort of stuff, right? He deported more people than anyone like ever, you know what I mean? So he was sort of anti-immigrant in ways, as one could suggest that could be. I don't necessarily agree that it would be, but that's certainly the accusation. So he was a war hawk, he was anti-immigrant, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But at the same time, as you and I have said, good, because we've had plenty of white dudes be president and do those same things too. So like in some ways, I do recognize the importance of identity just because of like who we are as a nation. So there are elements of that that are important. I don't understand anyone being a Hillary Clinton fan, so I'd love to talk to you. I should have in 2016 talked to your mom about that.
Yeah, she might still be open to it.
Yeah.
It's, part of it, as you said, was just the resume. Part of it's, very Democrat voting, family. But I think most of it was just, I just sense and hear the sorrow in her living through a lot of progress for women, obviously in the last several decades. But
yeah,
this just seemed like the door being slammed again. And I think I think personality did play a huge part in this, because it was just like, women, I think are picked on in certain ways pretty consistently, especially in positions of power. The whole pantsuit thing, I thought Hillary had some fun with that, but it speaks to like the almost like implicit disqualification of an aging woman when we seem to, that election, I think said, at least to my mom, probably to many women, maybe people otherwise, I don't know, that we chose this buffoon of a man over this highly qualified woman. What would have happened? Who knows? I'm not thrilled that she's pro-Israel. I don't even follow her anymore, so that's news to me. But it's related. I'll just weave in, my introduction to Trump was watching the first season of The Apprentice 20 years ago.
Yeah.
I thought it was a decent show. He's a reasonably good entertainer.
Yeah. I just know him from I knew him from Letterman. He would like be on Letterman sometimes. I was like, why is this guy? He's like a real estate. He owns buildings. Why is he on Letterman?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, what? He's just really rich, or I don't know.
I guess. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and that seems harmless enough. He's on a show. Not the first time we've hired an entertainer.
Yeah.
Good for sure. We do hire them, actually. That's true.
It's an extensive hiring process.
But not the first time we've hired an entertainer, an actor, etc.
Yeah.
And so I had shared this article with you that I wrote in 2016, and it was called Hope in the Age of Trump.
Yeah.
And that is literally the first thing I've ever put on Medium. I have my own blog.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
Sort of. In fact, it's the only thing I think that I've exclusively published on Medium. I don't even think I put that back on my blog. So interesting for me in that moment, to reflect on that. maybe one or two things I disagree with. That's probably always a good thing, right?
Yeah, sure.
Looking at my old work, uh, but also seeing a lot of threads around like love and collaboration and things that I obviously have
Yeah,
really
yeah,
tripled down on. Uh, so to me, like, I think I was tangled up. I don't think we were calling it TDS back then, but I was
no,
very entangled with the devastation of a lot of folks when
yeah,
Trump won in 2016. And then that my reaction was, I mean, it's funny that it's called Hope in the Age of Trump, but I do throw some punches there in the beginning,
yeah, yeah,
at him directly, and and just some broader kind of assumptions that we've discussed quite a bit on the show, but
yeah,
I'm not going to go into here. Maybe we can post the article. So it's been very interesting to reflect on just the last 8 years.
yeah,
Um, so uh, yeah, I see it a lot, and like as I started this little section, I see it a lot from liberal friends, and it's disappointing when it just becomes like name calling and personal attacks, and I
yeah.
just
In your piece, I thought it was an interesting thing to be like the things that we all like our collective is concerned about in terms of like the rise of racism or misogyny, like in our culture as it's seemingly approved of. Um, but that pointing out that of course those things have always existed, and like I guess at best he would be sort of an avatar of them to certain people. And so the hope is, well, there's nothing new here. These are the same problems we've always dealt with, and we've tried different ways to deal with them, and we have to, whether it doesn't matter who's president, we still have to seek to find common ground to override that sort of thinking. What I think is fascinating is I noticed, I think racism has gotten way bigger uh in his like in the past since he was elected. Certainly think that's true. I don't think it's the racism that like a lot of people seem to talk about, like racism against like brown people or black people or whatever. Um, like marginalized or minority populations. Um, in some ways, it's been funny that supposedly that happened during Obama. I never saw it. I don't know those people other than my granddad, who's always been kind of racist. So then I was like, all right, well, that's just not unusual. Um, I didn't see it come out in culture where like black people were somehow more like there was an increase of harm being perpetrated upon black folks during Obama's reign, which is kind of the well, that was kind of the public narrative. And then likewise, you would have expected like more harm to immigrants, like greater proportion of people committing hate crimes against immigrants or um, black folks or whatever. And then yes, certainly we've had Black Lives Matter movements during both Obama's and Trump's reign. And then for some reason didn't continue under Biden, which I think is super weird, by the way. I mean, I think part of that is the organization Black Lives Matter, like being revealed as monstrously corrupt, and I think that kind of undermined the industry. Well, and I think once they like came out, once that organization endorsed Biden, I was like, oh, it's over. I was like, they killed the movement, and now because we realize, and that's because that's what people have been claiming for like 6 months. They were like, all the donations go to Act Blue, which is literally like a Democrat-run funding site. So we don't actually know where any of this money is going. And then, of course, it turned out people were taking the money and running, et cetera, et cetera. So I think in some ways, but I would assume there certainly would have been enough cause after the horrific shooting at the supermarket or whatever. We could have had continued movement on that. Um, but it was fascinating. But I do think out like out and out racism against white people certainly got more popular during Trump's era, um, to where the abolish whiteness, white supremacy, blah blah, like where everything you didn't like was called white supremacy, or people started saying you couldn't be racist against white people or whatever, just sort of making them some sort of exception from the concerns that we've always had as a species. Um, So in some ways, I was like, oh, it was right. It was right that he brought more racism, I think, around like during his era. But it seemed mostly directed at like the groups that he was part of. But again, that may be my own Trump derangement syndrome. But I remember that in your piece that you were kind of talking about it always being there, and then him fostering it. And so, oh, that was something I want to ask, because that's one of the things I've always thought was maybe a Trump derangement thing, was saying that like he was somehow aiding and abetting like racists. Like I never I never understood that. And then what either people would, cite the Charlottesville thing or whatever. We're like, good people on both sides. And then I read the transcript and I was like, he was talking about the people there to just like say, keep the statue. He literally specifically was like, obviously not the white supremacists. They should be condemned in the harshest terms. And they clarified it like 6 times, but still for a year and a half, I thought that he had called white supremacists like they're as good as the people who came and fought the white supremacists. But that's never what he said. He never said that. But that's just what I absorbed culturally until I went and like read the transcript. So I was always like, what's racist about Trump? Like Trump to me, again, because I knew him from Letterman and pop culture or whatever. I don't know. People rapped about him. Like they dropped him in rap lyrics. I've seen him. He seems to like, I don't know, black celebrities at least. Um, I'm assuming as like a bit of a rapacious capitalist that he would functionally have something in his history that would slide towards racism, but probably more than anything, classism. Like like if you told me that Trump hated poor people, I'd be like, yeah, that wouldn't surprise me at all. But if you told me
Yeah.
he hated black people, I'd be like, nah, I don't think so. But again, I didn't know much about the guy, so I was. But anyway, you mentioned that in your 2016 thing. Like, why were people saying that he was going to make things more racist, or why did they think he was racist?
I can't cite examples. And I agree. Like I think a number of things are taken out of context and kind of twisted around. Um, and I think there are examples out there. Um, so there's some research to do.
Yeah,
I
the only
think,
one I ever found was that there was like there was specifically like a bunch of black families, I believe, evicted from one of his buildings at one point. Um, but there was correlations with class, with like money problems or whatever, in which case I was like, all right, it was just a New York real estate developer totally, pardon the French, shitting on the poor. You're like, okay, well, I mean, I don't think that's good. I'm not saying that's awesome, but
not exactly
it would
shocking.
not be unusual or like, I was like, well, this isn't too good of an evidence to make him like a race, like somehow, especially because he'd never been like a racist guy. Like he's been in the public eye for like 30 some odd years. And I mostly know him from like, especially the past like 5 or 6, 7 before he ran. Um, like I know him from like smoking cigars at some like Vegas nightclub, like with Snoop Dogg or whatever. Like I don't know. I was like, oh, I never got the racist thing just seemed weird.
Yeah, and again, like, well, let's just briefly distinguish. I know you have a pretty strict definition of racism about
Yeah.
a more traditional, uh, where it's direct and evidentiary or evidenceable.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And we're not going to go into this because we've talked about it quite a bit. So I think it's this bigger picture people paint. So the other kind of racism would be systemic racism, and if it's kind of like I think it depends on the whole picture to be painted. Like
Mm.
here's this arrogant, wealthy white dude who was born into a lot of wealth, who I think by all accounts, I'm curious what your research reveals, is a pretty
Mm.
shitty businessman. Um,
I mean, he's still going. I mean, he hasn't. I think he's filed bankruptcy. I believe he's filed like some sort of bankruptcy multiple times, but I could be wrong about that.
and it depends on, and yes, he's still going in the way that capitalism is designed. He knows
Yeah.
he plays the game. I mean, he
Yeah.
made a whole fucking show about it. So
He totally
like
did. Yeah.
it's like, hey,
Yeah. No
give him credit,
surprises. No
give
surprises
him
there.
give him credit for playing the game.
Yeah.
Uh, but yeah, if you just paint that big broader picture,
Yeah.
and I mean, I don't know, I don't sort of like his personality. I don't imagine I would like meeting him. Um, and so in this broader picture, I think it's painted that he must contribute to systemic racism, and his policies therefore would contribute to systemic racism.
Yeah.
And that's where I actually want to do a bit more research than I have, just because I feel like I think that's probably where the greatest contradiction is, I'm guessing,
Yeah.
of what was his actual impact as a president on things we care about. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
life affirming things. I think that's something you and I agree on.
Yeah. Oh,
Uh,
for sure.
and versus sort of the broader spectacle of just painting this picture that he's this and this is particularly through the woke lens, right? It's like he's just a fucking poster child for like everything,
Yeah.
the everything that's, you know, anti-woke. So
Yeah. Yeah.
once you're
I
in
can
that
see.
bucket, you're
Yeah.
done. I mean, it's just you know,
Yeah. There's no, well, yeah,
pushing.
there's no, I think that's one of the hard things with this sort of almost intersectional worldview is then there's no absolution really. The only absolution is sort of continual. It's kind of old school, right? It's sort of continual self-abasement and kind of almost like a form of like what's the sort of form of consistent apology if you're sort of born as a Brahmin or whatever. Like, um, yeah, it's like it's that Hinduism system, but then instead of being on the top and being like, yes, this means I'm blessed by God, it actually means you kind of have something to apologize for, sort of generally. But you can't really ever get out of it because you can't really change. Well, except for in the realms of gender identity, right? You can is your only exit for absolution, because then you can just say that you're a thing that puts you all of a sudden back in the privileged category, so you don't have to apologize as much. But other than that, you're kind of stuck in it once you're kind of identified as such. But the thing that was interesting too, because then this is one of the things that convinced me that TDS was real, was then Biden was elected, and he's a very wealthy politician for 40 years, helped engineer the prison industrial complex, talked about not wanting to turn our schools into like urban jungles, has referred to black people as cockroaches, little black kids, cockroaches. He sort of compared them to cockroaches. We know that. He said, if you ain't black, you don't ain't black if you don't vote for me. He was a school segregationist, really in terms of busing, to be perfectly clear about things, but he was. Um, he he's a white man. He's an old white man. So then he came in functionally doing so many of the same things that Trump did, but just in like he's not like quite as blowhardy. Like he's got
Yeah.
like he has a different like tempo or energy, but he's doing all the same things. So you've got like, and whatever, he gave a eulogy at a former KKK, the head of KKK's funeral. Like we know all this stuff, right? We know he's a segregationist. We know all this stuff. Like, so then you have all this actual evidence, and if slavery continues in the prison system, then he was a huge part of that as like an adamant like advocate for the crime bill. So you actually have so much more evidence that he is all those bad things that people call Trump, which is fine. Call Trump those things for the reasons you want to, but then you have to apply it to Biden as well. You have to be like significantly disappointed, and you have to feel your mom has to cry when Biden beats Kamala Harris in the primaries, when he beats what are the lady from Hawaii, who's like an independent now.
Oh
Uh,
yeah. She was the
uh,
love lady. Yeah, it was great.
yeah, who Russian also Hillary didn't like her and accused her of being a Russian plant, which is hilarious. That's like her go-to, dude. Um, anyway, so like Biden trounced multiple Marianne Williamson. He trounced multiple super capable, interesting, vibrant, talented, charismatic women in order to get like the nomination. Um, he's a white guy. He had multiple sexual harassment suits that were brought up multiple times throughout the primaries, including by Kamala Harris, who brought it up herself, like multiple debates. So you have all these same things. You have the white guy crushing women, even in both cases, in like two of the cases, they're like minority marginalized women. Um, segregationist proof, KKK involvement, prison industrial complex. Not to mention now he's president, and the military industrial complex like is booming in a way that it wasn't previously. We weren't in two wars during Trump. Maybe that's just because he was bad at negotiating wars with other people. I don't know, but that we weren't. So we have all these like very obvious harms, most of which speak to all the same concerns that you're talking about, but people aren't complaining the same, or the same people aren't complaining. So then I was like, well, wait a second. So you never actually had this is my assumption. This could be incorrect. I was like, this is why TDS is real. I was like, for some reason, it only bothers you when it's Trump, even if he doesn't do it as bad as other people. And then that point, I was like, oh, okay, well, people just aren't thinking clearly. And I don't know why, but it just doesn't make any logical sense because he did all the things. And why didn't people cry about it when Biden did it? Who did all those terrible things that we all know about? Like they're on NBC. It's not like, oh, you have to look up a thing. You know what I mean? But like NBC News, they talked about it in the primaries, all the sexual assault stuff. Like, so that was like on CNN, like on, you know what I mean? So I was like, I don't understand it. So then all the sadness, like your mom's tears about him beating Hillary, you were just like, "Ah, okay, well, did you cry about it when Biden like whooped those girls up? And if you didn't, then I think your tears are kind of crocodile-y. Or you just weren't paying any attention, which then is like, but then, okay, but if you weren't paying attention, then were your tears legitimate? This is the whole thing we've talked about a ton, though, where it's like, I can recognize your response as a legitimate response you're genuinely feeling, but is it a legitimate response in reaction to reality? Or is it delusion? You know?
Well, yeah, by 2020, I mean, not to mention because we were, I mean, maybe as we've, I think, revealed, especially liberals were absolutely mired in just a panic about the virus and the pandemic at that time.
Yeah.
Um, so that I think just fueled and fanned all manner of fear. And so, I mean, the message in 2020, which is the one I'm starting to see already for this election coming up
Yeah.
now in 2024, is basically like this election is about the very nature and future of our democracy. And like
Mhm.
Trump is a threat to democracy. That's a pretty
Yeah. It's fascinating, right? Yeah.
yeah.
That's so weird. Like, why isn't, I mean, Biden presided over multiple constitutional amendments being overridden. He's he's literally behind the most massive, I think, controversial uh like overreach into American civil rights since the Patriot Act, if not even exceeding the Patriot Act, right? And we all have the evidence nowadays. We all have the evidence. We can all click and read all the court documents from Missouri versus Biden. Oh, I think they renamed the case recently, which is a branding coup for Biden. But like, so he's been actively censoring
Oh, like they took his
Americans.
name out of it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's not Missouri versus
Wow.
Biden anymore. It's like something. It's something versus something. It's like a different. I can't remember what they renamed it, but it just happened in the past like couple of months or whatever. And I was like, I
Wow.
don't know how they managed to squeeze that one out. So it's just like that threatens democracy, right? I mean, he did an unconstitutional mandate where he tried to get literally millions of people fired from their jobs unless they took the drug that one of the companies that funded his inauguration made. You're just like, all right, well, we have you can be concerned about Trump, and this is my claim always. I was like, there's plenty of reasons that because I've researched him to a degree that I was like, oh, okay, I don't like these things. These are concerning. I especially don't. He's far too blithe about environmental protection. It's probably my biggest like ding
Yeah,
against
I agree
him.
with that. Yeah.
Because he's just like free market, corporate, like
Yeah.
capitalism. It'll figure itself out. And you're
Yeah.
like, sometimes, dude, we gotta do some stuff.
We don't have a million years to rebuild that glacier or that
Yeah, exactly.
well,
Yeah, yeah.
it's a bad
This is
example. The glaciers are melting, but anyway, that preserve or that mountain or that
yeah,
whatever.
yeah. Like this is like I don't know. That's just him. That's one of the to me one of the biggest dings against him. But if you're going to be mad about those things, like those are the reasons. Even if you tell yourself those are the reasons, you have to be mad when other people do those things, don't you? I mean, wouldn't that just be? Isn't that definably at least what we used to call that would definitely be hypocrisy? Like if you
Yeah,
like
and
it,
this is
if you
this is
yeah
where I mean I know I've spent years kind of crawling out of identity politics of just like, oh, I'm going to vote this way because I've always voted this way or because I believe in this party. And you've helped with some of that. This our exploration here has helped with some of that. Just to realize, gosh, that's actually really a dangerously lazy way to approach politics. It like most things, we come down to
yeah
do your homework, try to understand things best you can, reason it out, have real
yeah
conversations, have debates, right? Let's have
yeah
real
yeah
debates and sharpen our swords as we are attempting to do here.
yeah
Um, so for me, I no, I don't know that they question it. I think there's certain people
yeah
who are just so, so attached to, if I vote for the Democrat, this will all be set straight. And
yeah.
so in a weird way, it's like an implicit make America great again. I mean, that's what's
It is. Oh, sure
mind
it is. Yeah.
mind-boggling to me. And this
I
came out
mean,
the other day.
build back better is the. I mean, it's like you're saying the same basic thing because you're not. It's like triple B and MAGA or whatever. I was like, I don't understand how people are like, oh, well, that's it's not a world of difference. It's the same. We're saying the same basic message. Build back, right? You're okay. So you're building it. You're doing better. He says, great. What are you talking about building? You're obviously talking about the country. So you're obviously talking about America. And you're talking build it back. So you're restoring it to a previous thing. So that's an again. You're like, this is the same message. They just don't have hats, I guess. I don't know. Maybe they have hats. I've never seen anyone wearing a BBB hat. But yeah, but then I want to ask though, like, so then calling this TDS is sort of like glib, but as the more time, the more and more people I've talked to, and even just watching takes that I view as like objectively hypocritical, that I was like, is it a real syndrome? Meaning like, is this a diagnosable, is this a version of a diagnosable mental illness? Like I would say, now I'm not really super pro national or patriotic or whatever. So I think like people who are super patriotic, I think is almost like a mental illness personally. And so I'm putting it in the same category that I was like, if you were so hardcore Republican that you'll just vote for a Republican no matter what, I'd be like, I think that's weird, right? And I would assume most Democrats would be like, they're brainwashed, they have a problem. So then you have to think the same thing about yourself and your party as well. So then, like, is that a like is that would it be even reasonable to kind of refer to that as like a syndrome in a non-joking way? Like, is that a mental illness? Is that an inability to process reality, which I
I
think functionally mental illnesses are.
the most favorable explanations I have are a lot of times it's just inherited. I mean, that's my story.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
think
yeah,
we talked about that where it's like just gently
yeah,
questioning
yeah,
a lot of things and ideas that I inherited, including basically being a multi-generation family of card-carrying Democrats.
yeah, yeah.
Um, and we talked quite a bit in our styles. Like I'm not the best researcher. I mean, it's you're pretty prolific in that way. And so it's challenging, I think, for people like me who are maybe more feelers than researchers to
Sure.
really find truth and make a decision.
Yeah, yeah,
And I'm not suggesting everybody who votes down one party ticket is just voting on feelings, but I think that's a lot of what governs this, and that's come up in a lot of our conversations. That seems to govern a lot of things.
yeah. And that seems like gangster stuff to me. Like that's to me that's like subtle gangster stuff. Whereas like, and what I mean by gangster is like, at least in my brain, like I picture maybe having grown up around Boston, we're like gangs actually, like organized crime kind of still sort of existed. And I was assumed it was somehow interwoven with politics. And you can imagine like back in the day or whatever, like Whitey Bulger, like sending his goons around like a South Boston neighborhood and being like, hey, everybody here, unless you want trouble, you're voting for this guy. Okay? That's what you do. That's what we're all doing. We're a family, right? We're a family. We're gonna all vote together. We're all just gonna do this thing. And so I was like, if you can get people to just do that to themselves and just be like, well, we've all got to stick together because this is like, we're a family. We got to do this. Then I'm like, oh, you're sort of, in some ways, I guess you got gangstered by propaganda potentially, or like a media thing, or propagandized by people around you. But basically, you got gangstered without even getting like the free turkey at Thanksgiving off the back of the truck. But again, this is also my bias. As I've said before, I'm a registered independent, and I'm like, I find like party adherence like sort of disturbing. I mean, even if adherence to independence, like I wouldn't just like only vote for independence either. I'm like, I don't want to,
uh,
I gotta vote for I'm gonna vote for, I don't care what party you're part of. I will vote for, I'm probably not every single party, but I've voted for a lot of the parties that are out there, even the small, I voted Green Party before, um, Republicans, Democrats, Independents. I don't care. Oh, freedom. What was that? The Freedom and Solidarity? No, Freedom and Solidarity Party. I can't remember what Brian T. Carroll's party was that I voted for president last time. But I was like, I don't care. But again, I'm not super I moved a lot as a kid, so maybe I don't tend towards that tribal feely thing. Whereas I know you stayed in a couple places, right? For kind of good little extended runs. So in some ways you build like a sense of community. And then there is more of a sense of, hey, we're doing this together. And again, I understand that. That's really the whole principle behind like being really cautious about immigration and not just letting anyone in, because we need some degree of tribal homogeny in order to function as a system, right? Um, so you do need like, again, I am actually anti-assimilationist. You know what I mean? When people come over and you expect them to just become Americans, you're like, yeah, that's like our whole deal. You come from wherever, all you have to do is you become a hyphenate married person. You get to keep your old name and you put a dash, an American after it, and then you become whatever that is. So you bring your old culture, but you also become American, and then we we all have the American in common and the other stuff not in common, but we have that commonality that keeps us unified as a tribe. I was like, I don't know. I always thought that was, as a kid, I thought I was like, oh, that was kind of cool. You know, I grew up like thinking America was a corrupt and like mischievous country, and I stopped saluting the flag or standing for the anthem when I was probably like 12 or 13. And so I've had a lifetime of that. But I get the unity. That I was always like, oh, I thought that was cool that you could be from anywhere and you just do dash American. And no one expects you to like, you must be French. When you come to France, you must be French. It's like, no, you can be that, but then be this too. Let's just be both. Let's be together. It's like a marriage.
That is beautiful. I agree with that. I'm reminded of this book by Howard Ross, Our Search for Belonging, How Our Need to Connect is Tearing Us Apart. And
Ooh,
he talks quite a bit about
yeah.
tribalism, and it's a quagmire. Yeah, it seems like the
Yeah.
tighter we get into our tribe, and I've thought about this for years. Like it seems like one of the natural consequences of being part of a tribe
Mm,
is being susceptible. Now we have a choice here, but being
yeah.
susceptible to the human tendency to other and to make
Yeah.
ourselves better because we've already
Yeah.
chosen this tribe. So
Yeah.
we a less mature, I would say, way to sort of go
Yeah.
about it is to need to reinforce the betterness of this tribe we've chosen,
Yeah.
and therefore reinforce that we made a good choice
Yeah. Yeah.
by othering, and at a minimum maybe just saying, oh, we're better or we're separate, but then obviously at the other end of that spectrum is all out war and you know uh total destruction.
Yeah. I think that's one of the reasons wars happen. Obviously, because I'm a Christian, I'm like, why does God let war happen? You know, it's like, I mean, especially I would say the war in Gaza is
Good
kind of
question.
especially
Yeah.
sad and tragic. But I think that's one of the rational reasons, even just from a human perspective, like not even having to get to into divine mind in a sort of transcendent way. You're like, it just makes a lot of practical sense because we need to know who we are as a species. So if we just stop doing that, my assumption, we're going to just do it elsewhere, sicker, grosser. Just like the same way we abolished slavery, right? But supposedly, reportedly, according to people who monitor these sorts of things, this is just expert, opinion data that there are more slaves now than there have ever been throughout human history. So it's like, all right, we can see who we are, right? And it's good, I think, especially in our country presently with this tribalistic instinct, to look over there and be like, Palestinians and Israelis, dude, this is not that far off from the Hutus in Rwanda, like starting to kill their neighbors. You're like, y'all are not that different. You have a ton of genetic material in common. Like y'all are from a lot of the same stock somewhere. Like it, or at least at the very least, you're like a couple thousand miles separated from whatever the more Arab based stock was, or even hundreds of miles, right? So you're a different people group to some degree. Yes, it's in there, but we're so alike, y'all. Y'all are cousins at the very least, and we're all related, whether you're a creationist or an evolutionist. That we all came ultimately from someone swapped over from into hominid, right? Or we all came from Adam and Eve, but like so we're all related. So then this whole idea of this constant, yeah, like weird strangeness of division, we can see where it leads. And we need to know that. Like we need to see that because we forget that. This is like why we teach history and history of wars so often. You're like, we need to remember how bad it can get quickly if we do that, right? And it may not even quickly might mean multiple generations, but then you raise multiple generations thinking of that person over there who looks a lot like them, maybe even smells a little bit like them. Is like, no, but they're like, they hate us. And I see that so often, or online, of course, that like people are just like, yep, MAGA people, they hate immigrants, they hate black people, they hate queer people. You're like, would you not realize how Israel Palestine this is? Yeah, the Jews, they hate Palestinians. All they want to do is crush us and get rid of a, you know what, the Palestinians, they all hate Jews. All they want to do is wipe us off the earth. It's like you're saying the same stuff, guys. And we actually have way less evidence for this than Israel and Palestine does, because people have been dying there on on both sides of those borders, and people have been hurting each other for like a very long time. Whereas here we don't even have the type of evidence, that type of evidence of tribal conflict actually existing. So it feels like we're trying to like cotton it up, like we're trying to make it happen in a way. And that makes me sad.
Yeah, and yeah, there in the book, The Dawn of Everything, I
Mm.
learned this term schismogenesis. I think I mentioned
Oh yeah,
first.
yeah.
is a really fun word to say.
So much fun.
Highly recommend it. But it's, anything from like, two kids who start to develop different identities and different qualities
Yeah.
as in it's funny, I would say as opposites, not necessarily in opposition,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
a funny distinction, but like sort of
Yeah.
as to be the opposite, to distinguish ourselves and our own identity based on not being like what we see out there.
Yeah.
But they mention, and this is particularly interesting to me with all of my work, here in America about racism and well, the colonization in particular, tracing back to two American Indian tribes, I think one in California, what is now California, and one in Oregon. One, and like you said, like basically, as far as we can tell, sharing a lot of DNA,
Yeah.
sort of the same regions, at least on the West Coast, but close enough regions, but one being very, very peaceful, and one literally having enslaved people
Yeah.
long before the Europeans got here. So I'm not
Yeah.
in little, I don't know if I have to caveat stuff on this
Qualify.
show.
Yeah.
Not saying it's what the Europeans did was great by any stretch, but also I think we sort of don't often look at the whole picture, and I think that's
Yeah.
one thing I have in common. One thing you bring up Palestine, I think that is becoming an extraordinarily challenging intersection for Biden
Sure.
when you've got the woke camps full on pro-Palestine at this point,
Yeah.
um, which is basically making them fairly anti-Biden in
Yeah.
his just adamant, pro-Israeli stance, all the way down to pumping billions of dollars in, which I know from our text that's something neither of us agree with, is
No.
funding
Terrible
the
idea.
war. Yeah.
It's a terrible idea. What's this constant? It's this constant thing of like spending, and it's annoying to be an adult. I feel like this is such an adult thing to pay attention to, but it's like after, I think it just wears you down. You pay taxes for so long that eventually you're just like, dude, you have so much of my money. And like, what are you doing with it? Like, wait, I don't want that. Like, how do I pay for things and I get to earmark? Like, how do I not have a line item veto on how you spend my damn cash? So like, and you just get madder and madder a little bit over time. I was like, stop that. Stop that out. No, like if you were gonna just like the same thing, whatever. If I meet an unhoused individual who asks for something, I don't really tend to give people money. I try not to ever really give anybody money. But like I was like, oh, if you approach me, like if we're close to a place, you want some food, I'll get you food or whatever. Like, are you hungry? I was like, do you need a blanket? Like, do you need something? I'm not gonna give you money because I don't know what you're gonna do with the money. And I feel like the government is like that. They act like our government is like not even just unhoused, but they're like it's kind of schizophrenic and violent, and they're going to use the money for bad things. Like I know it. Like at some point they're going to use it for bad, and they are because they keep using it for bad things, and then no one really ever gets any justification for it. That's the thing that drives me crazy. Like, wait, why are we giving? Why did we give Ukraine money? Basically, because we
Oh,
kind of got them. We got them in
it
the
just
war.
becomes monopoly money. It's billions. I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah.
nobody
We
can
gave.
really
Yeah,
comprehend what that is.
no, and we gave trillions here to people here, and you're like, oh, that's kind of better. It's like, but you gave it away because you shut the country down, which you never should have done. I mean, that's the number one reason I would never I would, I mean, I haven't ever voted for Trump and never plan to vote for him, but like he started the lockdowns and I was like, that's one of the worst policy decisions in my lifetime. So I got nothing. No, I got nothing for you, buddy. Like, no, like I can't vote for you. I can't vote for Biden because he was basically like Trump, but worse. So then, but also, this is the funny thing. You were talking about let me just loop back to tribes. In that is my general like disposition. I feel lonely sometimes. You know what I mean? There are other people who think like me in the world or whatever, and whatever. Independents are the largest, is the largest group in the United States, but we're not. I actually don't think independents are actually super talkative online, at least anyway, or even out in person.
I
So
mean,
like,
half
I
of
feel,
them
yeah,
don't vote, I'm assuming.
yeah, exactly. They're just like, no, the system sucks. I'll just pay my money and not pay attention to how you use it.
Right.
Um, yeah, no, it's a weird thing. I think again, but the one good thing about it is people can see at least all the like you were saying the woke folks who are down who are like pro-Palestine, um adamantly so, that you're seeing the same stuff that Trump dealt with for 2 years, where it's like Hillary is calling you like Russian influenced, like if you're pro-Palestine, you've really fallen under Russian influence, right? And for 2 years they were like he didn't win the election. He won it because of Russian interference, right? They essentially did an election denying campaign for 2+ years. So, and then Trump denied his election for actually just a shorter amount of time. Again, he did the same stuff that other people do. He just did it like usually he just says it in a grosser way. But he's more plain spoken person, which I actually kind of appreciate. Like I don't feel like when Trump lies, I'm like, it's to me, most of the time it's so obvious. And then B, you're like, he's a bluffing blowhard who just like says ridiculous, like I'm the best. How many times he's referred to them as the best at something, the greatest at something? You're like, he's like a decathlete, I guess. He can just do anything. Like he's a
Oh,
genius level decathlete. There's nothing he can't do.
he's a character of himself. I mean,
He
and he's
is. Yeah. He's got a character.
remarkable.
Yeah. He's got
Um,
a gig. That's how he keeps the gig going. It's that stuff. I mean, that part I think is very funny. But yeah,
well,
it is a weird thing now because I'm still seeing a ton of like mad at Biden, but even the people who are like, we're mad at Biden, but obviously you could never vote. We have to keep Trump out of office. And then I'm like, well, wait a second. No, people are dying, and you're like, it's this guy's fault. Like ultimately, one of the best things flipping Trump did was to like at least chill some stuff out in the Middle East. One could say that it was still a pro-Israel move. The Abraham Accords are definitely like favoring Israel, but it cools tensions, which means then hopefully more people would feel united who didn't feel united previously, and hopefully that could actually help. That would be the goal long term. That you could actually kind of negotiate our way. We could diplomacy enter our way out of these tensions by enhancing regional homogeny, at least in terms of like dealing with each other as equals and not trying to like hope for the other's destruction, which is like I don't know, that's like a peace progressy thing. So I was like, how? And so are you seeing that your circles as well though? Where is there still the like, but we have to stop Trump no matter what?
oh my, are you kidding me? That's like all I see.
Yeah. So then, but that doesn't really make any logical sense. Like that to me, you're like, well, wait a second. If this thing's so important and it wasn't this bad under Trump, and Trump actually did like the most notable thing in the region, like in actually quite a long time, then to try to bring some regional peace. Now, of course, that I understand the problems with it. We can talk about that separately, but like, um, yeah, I just don't understand. That's the thing that constantly confuses me, and it constantly confuses me in the realm of like, well, wait, are you not really concerned about this then? Like, wait, does not really bother? Like, you seem pretty bothered about it, and I think you should be bothered about what's happening in Gaza. Then, but it doesn't bother you enough that you would like change any of your tribal. Again, that seems deranged to me. That seems like a Trump derangement syndrome, where it was like, oh, okay, but think of the worst things that could happen if Trump got elected again. And you're like, but what are you talking about? Like, it's so much worse now. Like, people are broker. There's multiple wars. Like, I don't even know what functionally like as a human in the world that we segregation returned open segregation returned to the United States of America. That's to be the peak of awfulness. So then like how
I
what sort
think,
of what how could it be worse? I mean, I know it can be. Listen, I know anything can get worse, but
well, and I think this goes back to, Trump being a threat to democracy.
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
and that's the best I can look at. And,
yeah.
I think there was plenty of evidence that, and I think I even mentioned this in the article, and then we saw it throughout Trump's presidency. I
Mm.
mean, he poked and pushed and stretched and broke everything he could. I mean, he's like a bull in a china closet. And I don't even think that's entirely a bad thing. I mean, stress testing our democracy, because
Yeah,
I think one of
yeah,
the things we realized was, oh wow, like a lot of the things we take for granted were kind of etiquette based more than like
yeah.
policy based.
Policy
Like,
or
oh, there's just
function.
a certain
Yeah,
way you do, and he wasn't going to leave the office peacefully, and
yeah, yeah,
it turned out to be more of a show. And I think we've just got to pay attention to how much of his stuff is for show, and
yeah,
it works. It works. I mean, he
yeah,
really knows how to rally people up.
yeah,
So I was wondering, one of the things around that whole piece, I think it was the last thing you sent me about Trump being a threat to democracy, was about the
yeah,
third party vote throwing your vote away. So you just talked about being independent. Now
yeah.
I don't abide by that. I think that's total
No,
horseshit, because it's
I think
like,
that's yeah. I think
oh,
it's I think it's evil, dude.
you're telling me on the one hand that
Yeah.
that he's a threat to our democracy, and you're also advocating for me to vote out of pure fear
Yeah.
and not not vote for what I believe in, which to me would hopefully be the absolute hallmark of democracy.
I would hope so, right? Yeah, you're literally saying, but that's what people have been saying. This is why I think it's deranged, right? They've been saying essentially, like, it doesn't matter what we have to do. Journalists openly are like, we can't do journalism the same anymore because of Trump. So journalists have openly been like this whole like objectivity thing and talking to people on both sides. Like we have, in order to beat Trump, we have to do this, right? There was insider, like whatever, like expert opinion, meaning people who worked at CNN who said that was CNN's like whole goal was basically to like get Trump out. And then once they got Trump out, they were going to focus on turn to climate change, right? They always need some form of alarmism to kind of fuel people clicking or watching their channel. Especially nowadays when CNN doesn't like gets paltry ratings compared to podcasts or whatever. We've also seen that with the legal system, right? Where a state court found Trump guilty of a federal crime which he'd never been charged based on just allegations half the whole country away. You know what I mean? Like when Colorado and the DC. So something happened over there. He was never charged with crime, but Colorado's like, you're off the ballot because you obviously participated in incited insurrection. Never been charged with it. So they're inventing. I was like, I don't understand that. That's not a way more potent threat to democracy than anything else, than anything Trump did. I was like, I don't, because that's again, but I'm an objective guy. So I'm like, well, there's better evidence here, like for this thing. So that's the thing I don't understand. Like what threat to democracy does he, I mean, like he blustered a ton. Did he deny the election on, I think, crappy evidence? Yes. Did the Democrats do that for 2 years with the whole Russiagate thing? Crappy evidence? Yes. So that's pretty de rigueur. He left the office on exactly the day he was supposed to. I don't think it was delayed 1 hour. He left when he was done. He's running for president again on votes. They're just going to be voting again for these same two people. I don't know what he didn't do it, as far as I know, he didn't do anything during his whole tenure that somehow like flipped democracy on its head or like undermined democracy in any substantive way that was not already taking place, right? You could talk about redistricting or gerrymandering or whatever, but I was like, okay, that's happened. That's not like a novel Trump thingy. That's Democrats, Republicans constantly doing that, trying to like redistrict so then they can claim that district. I think it's gross. But I barely understand it. I'm not involved in local politics, so. But I was just like, that's the thing I don't understand. Like, how could you make that claim, and who would believe that claim? Again, in any sense, meaning Trump somehow is more a threat to democracy than Biden is. Like, I don't, like, whatever. We just fired on people in Iran. Like, he seems like he's trying to start wars without Congress's approval. He violated
Well,
5 to 7.
that's it. I've heard people say he's come out and said he will be a dictator on day one, and I don't know. I haven't. I don't know. Have you?
He did. Yeah, he said, I'm going to be a dictator on day one. Drill, baby, drill, and thing. What did he say? He literally said that. He said it partially joking. He said he was going to, and by being a dictator, he said he was going to do 2 things. I can't remember. It was drill, baby, drill, and one other thing. So you're like, all right. But yeah, the crazy thing is people ran with that, and they were like, you pull a pull quote, and you're like, see, he's going to be a dictator on. He said only day one. He said for 1 day. Okay, I'll be a dictator for 1 day. For 1 day, I'll do it for 1 day. You're like, all right. So, okay, like Biden tried to be a dictator and force millions of people to take a product they most tenably probably had no need for whatsoever, or he would fire them, which was ruled to be unconstitutional. So wait a second. Trump never messed with people to that degree. Anyone, anywhere. So it was just like, that's the thing. I was like, it doesn't make any, how is he, that's pretty dictatory, right? And he tried to do it. It took like 6 months for the courts to stop him doing it.
But again, like that's not in, I don't know, maybe I should make a chart which will reveal, I think, some of this hypocrisy, I think, on the left, I guess. I don't even know what side to call it, frankly, because the intersections are becoming a bit convoluted, as we've talked about quite a bit. People, I'll just say the left for convenience, but sort of the circles I'm more in, like none of that's on their radar. like they don't think the vaccine mandates or masks or any of that were bad. In fact, they at this point, many of them might think that's why we're quote out of the pandemic. I mean, that's the narrative I think that's been spun
Yeah.
somewhat successfully.
Yeah. But it's funny. I mean, I just looked at Australian data today. I don't know what it is in the US, but people aren't doing stuff anymore. Like in Australia, they had like 95% vaccinated in the first round, but now it's something like 3 or 6%, I think. 6% of the population is up to date based on the recommendations of all the same organizations. And it's the same here thing in this country. So it's like those people, I think anyone who said that, I don't know anybody who's up to date on their vaccines anymore. So then I don't think they think it's actually good because they're not doing it. Like almost nobody is doing it functionally. Like it's gone down to like single digits from
Hmm.
70%. So then even they,
And I can validate that just
yeah,
anecdotally. Like I don't hear anybody talking about going to get their vaccine shot anymore. And
no,
that was a big fucking deal for a while.
that
Like, oh,
was a
I'm going
huge
to get
deal.
my shot.
And
Yeah.
they thought it was evil when Trump did it. Then when Biden was in, then it was somehow safe, even though it's the same vaccine. And now 2.5 years later, it's not a big deal if you don't do it. Like that to me that is mental illness. Like that's crazy. That's that's that there's no thing scenario where that makes any like logical sense. And so this is the thing. To me, this is what I've started to realize. TDS is real. To me, the people who are like Trump is a threat to democracy are as crazy. I'm just going to use the word crazy. They're as full on crazy as the people who think Trump is like the QAnon style. They're QAnon levels of crazy. They think Trump is like the savior. Like he's literally going to like get into office. He's going to like get rid of all, he's going to put all the pedophiles in government in prison. He's going to save the country. He's been appointed by God for this time to be this warrior. You know, they have like velvet paintings of him on their wall or whatever. They have memes of him like shirtless, like in front of an army. You know what I mean? Those people have Trump derangement syndrome where they literally think he's some sort of messiah. Those people are nuts. Now, I think people on the left would generally agree those people are nuts. So, hey, we
Yeah.
have common ground. But the
Fair
thing
enough.
is, if you're saying Trump is a threat to democracy and you're not saying the same thing about, let's say, Biden, for example, since they're running against each other, you're as crazy as that. You're like that level of crazy. And this is, I just say, is a good thing. It's a good thing to know. Like, it's good to know where we're crazy as people. I don't say that like I'm not othering you. I'm just saying, oh, you literally do not have you can't rationally function in the world as relates to these things. But that's just, again, that's just based on evidence and perception. That's not my feeling. And again, because I'm not part of any tribe, I have neither the positive or negative aspects of that to like glom onto, you know. And I
Yeah.
come from Boston, where calling your family members crazy is de rigueur. It's not hateful. Doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean I hate you at all. Not even a
Well,
little bit.
I'm probably slow to notice this, or maybe it was out before and I forgot, but this meme, or I mean, it's basically an ad from the Democrats with Biden's
Yep.
red eyes.
Yes.
So I'm
The
just kind
dark,
of
yeah.
like, I don't exactly know where that came from, but I'm like, it just feels um, like, wow, we're just putting the crazy out in front. I mean, I don't know
Yeah.
what
Yeah, it sells.
group
So that
they're
oh yeah,
doing
so
to.
that was a reference to Dark. That's like Dark Brandon, which is like this character that people talk about Biden online. That
Oh
like
yeah, yeah.
that he's like evil. Like remember when he did that speech where he basically called what it felt like to most people, he called half the country a threat to democracy. He was like MAGA Republicans. He was like, not all
Right.
Republicans, but anybody who voted for Trump is technically would be lumped into like that. I mean, that was his slogan. So it's anybody who voted for Trump. So pretty much half the voting population, 47 million or whatever it was, 48 million people, he pretty much called a threat to democracy in a presidential address. And it was lit really red. It was like super dark in the background with red things. And people were
Okay.
like, this is the most Hitler-y stuff we've ever seen from an American president. Like this looks like a nightmare thing. So it kind of developed into this dark Brandon thing. For those who don't know, Brandon is what people call Biden. Let's go, Brandon is basically a form of saying F you, Biden, but you can get past the censors. Anyway, so that was a dark Brandon meme that had already gone around. And it was specifically making as big a deal as possible about this theory amongst some deranged and some normal people on the right that the Super Bowl was kind of part of the Democrats' plan to win the vote. So that, because Taylor Swift, like a noted like Democrat and arguably one of the most influential people in our culture,
Yeah.
starts dating the guy on the Chiefs who they're like, oh, they're going to make sure the Chiefs are in the Super Bowl, so then they can supercharge Taylor Swift's influence. And she happens to be dating the guy who did a bunch of ads for Pfizer's COVID vaccine, which is a super healthy guy and doesn't make any logical sense. So that got people thinking. They're like, oh wait, this is all manipulated. Pfizer paid him $20 million and he paid Biden $6 million and blah, 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 blah. And so it was this big thing that was like, we know the Chiefs are even going to win the Super Bowl because that's how the Democrats want it. So basically, it was this vast conspiracy theory. I'm sure with some elements of absolute flights of fancy involved. So that's where they were posting it. He was saying basically, I can't remember what the tag was. It was something like exactly like I planned it. So they were like, oh, they were mocking him as like master manipulator, evil Biden.
It's hilarious, like how much of that is lost on folks who aren't following the. I don't know how. What did it take you 3 minutes to explain all that? I mean, I think
Yeah.
I think so many people are so checked out and so just like I don't even know what game you're playing.
Yeah.
I know we gotta have in landing. There's
Yeah.
two quick anecdotes I'll weave in. So the other day I was with folks. I'm, as we talked about, I'm doing a lot of work related to Palestine and Israel, and particularly this was actually developing a fundraiser to deliver groceries to people in the West Bank of Palestine. It's like, hopefully we can all agree on that. They haven't worked in 4 months.
Yeah.
And anyway, I was talking to some of my colleagues, and one was very distraught about all of that, and she said, like, can't. I think it was something like, when can we go back to being good again?
Mm.
And I was like, gosh, I mean, you got there much earlier than me at 12 years old, but I've developed a pretty cynical view of America, the colonizer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it was funny. My reaction was, I said something like, well, let's just all go get some MAGA hats.
Yeah.
And then another colleague, and bless her heart, because I want to actually be this voice more often. I truly do. She
Yeah.
was just like, let's not. Well, and she phrased it like, let's not do what Israel is doing.
Yeah.
And sort of make the other wrong, or sort of go low, as one campaign would say, right?
Yeah.
Which has a few like tentacles to it. But
Mm-hmm.
the funny thing was, I wasn't. So my mere mention of MAGA hats was
Yeah.
immediately construed as the fuck Trump thing.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, that wasn't it. I just thought it was funny that my colleague, who I love and trust, sort of made this bizarre comment that America was. I was like, God, it was meant to say, when were we the good guys? And,
Yeah.
and so I don't, I think Make America Great Again is kind of silly in that way. And
Yeah. Or make America good again. I mean, literally, it's what she was saying. Make America good again.
Exactly.
It's an acronym.
And there's something in there. I think that actually may be an important clue to the perception that Trump is racism and promoting systemic racism, because the implication there, for a lot of us, is what he's talking about is like, let's go back to, like, I don't know, the 50s, when like the white, post World War II white nuclear American family was just given basically all these resources and access to college and all kinds of stuff that started building generational wealth. I think that's the perception of what MAGA means.
Yeah. It's that bad faith assumption. That's othering, though, in and of itself, right? This is the thing I've been trying to do. We talked about this, and I've even over the past 5 or 6 months, I think spurred by our conversations, it's like, not only do I need to really seek to understand what parts of these different arguments, different perspectives are based in reality or intuition or unreality or whatever, but then also seek to really do my best to steel man any position I'm opposed to, or anything I kind of get a bad feeling about. If my intuition says this is bad, let me figure out a way to be like, what's the strongest argument for what they're doing? Whereas a straw man, right, is to like put forth the weakest argument and just be like, they hate, like the weakest argument is like Republicans hate black people, Republicans hate gay people, or whatever, right? You know what I mean? That's the weakest argument, right? Like when I said the vaccine mandates were a hate-based endeavor, that's because I looked at 6 or 7 other arguments that I thought were tenable and then realized they have no evidence for them. And I was like, okay, well, now I'm left with one because they said these hateful things, which are like openly hateful. And then they did this thing. So now you can say that. But like, there's this instinct to just be like, oh, Bad faith, bad faith. They don't, they're a threat. They think these things that are bad. They think these things that are bad because they're bad. And then you're like, oh, because then you're stuck too. Because then we're like, where do we go from there? Because you've already dehumanized that person, which means, as you would resonate with me, you've already dehumanized yourself.
Yeah, you're stuck. I agree with that.
Yeah.
The last thing I want to weave in is I
Yeah.
saw a thread on Facebook the other day. We don't have to go deep into this, but even the fact that this was posted sort of speaks to the topic. It's something along the lines of paraphrasing that, can the coaches and therapists on, in my Facebook friend group,
Yeah.
it was like, can you diagnose Trump?
Yeah. Yeah.
Which most people were kind of like, oh, it would be really inappropriate to try to diagnose somebody based on
Yeah. I
not
don't.
or
Yeah.
talking to them or having a
Yeah.
session
Yeah.
or anything.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
thought, well, that's good. But I interpret, my bias is to interpret that, and I have had these conversations around, again, like healing, and
Yeah.
if really what we know, what we can piece together of Trump's upbringing and maybe some of the traumas he faced,
Yeah.
it's like, I don't know. I think it can be valuable. We shouldn't make assumptions, and that can be a dangerous
Sure. Sure.
lockdown. But trying to have empathy based on how somebody came to be, does that excuse their actions when they have that much power? Absolutely not. And I don't.
Yeah.
You're not. Neither of us agree that actions should be excused based on really anything.
No, it
But
just helps give you understanding and be like, oh, there were reasons. There were
exactly.
reasons. Like there's a
Yeah.
reason he bluffs through the world the way that he does. Okay. All right. And the reason he talks the way he does and the way he doesn't care whether people are offended by it or whatever, you know what I mean? Where he grew up, what city he grew up in, a father who probably, we get the sense, kind of wasn't super awesome and said whatever he wanted, but he was like, well, but it helped me grow up tough. All right. So I'm going to talk the same way. It'll help people grow up tough because that's what we need to be. We're weak. We're weak sauce. Like, right. Because it's weak sauce to other people to like assume everyone's hateful. That's weak. That's weak, and we need to get stronger in growing and understanding. Right? You're like, oh, okay. So you always want to figure out, yeah, what's the best, diagnose them in the most generous way possible, as opposed to, this is why I think TDS is real, is people just have left that completely out of the equation. Like literally, you just say Trump around certain people, and they're like, they get all mad, and then if you ask them to explain it, they're like, you flipping know. You're like, all right, that's crazy. That'd be like, I don't like hamburgers. What? You know hamburgers are the best. Like if anyone acted that way about anything, any person, especially a person they don't even know. Like I don't know Trump. You know what I mean? Like, so again, like, yes, an actual therapist is like, I can't diagnose a person I've never met, but I don't,
Well,
we all do it.
so thumbs up. I
Yeah.
think
Thumbs up.
TDS is real.
It's a real phenomenon, y'all. Watch out for it. But and honestly, as you were speaking to human empathy, let's avoid all DSs, all derangement syndromes about any people. Let's love our enemies, man, as hard as we can. While still, like the cool thing I love about the biblical admonition, the commandment to love your enemies, is it doesn't say they're not your enemies anymore. It doesn't say your enemies become your friends.
Yeah.
Still can oppose you, still can be trying to harm you, whatever. But our call still is to love, even as we're knowing they're enemies. So I'm not saying enemies don't exist and people aren't scary and people aren't mean. But man, can we choose love? Yes, we can.
Let's end on that note. I love you.
I love you.
Thank you.
You're not my enemy.
You are not mine. Bye.
Bye.